Hello, everyone. I'm Sushmita, and the topic I would be speaking on is Scaling Intelligence, the AI Native Pharma Organization. Before I talk about what is AI native, I would like to spend some time on the evolution of the pharmaceutical industry. So if we look back, maybe in the 1950s or the 1970s or even before that, it all started off with a manual era, meaning it's all manual processes, paper, paper-based, heavy documentation, and trial and error based, and also innovation being serendipity driven. And then came the computer era or the digital era, where the protein structures were identified using the X-ray crystallography or the NMRs, and the compounds were synthesized at scale using combinatorial chemistry. Then came the data-driven era, where the very well-known example of the Human Genome Project was completed, and that had made the path for precision medicine. So the very well-known example of Gleevec, which is imatinib for the treatment of CML, was purely based on not a one-size-fits-all approach, but more a personalized approach, meaning undertaking the diagnostic test to understand whether that genetic mutation is present and then prescribing the medicine. And then came the AI/ML era, where AI was used for various use cases across the value chain, and some of which were also discussed in the fireside chat just we have heard from Mr. Sarvesh. And then came the Gen AI era, where the very famous example of AlphaFold, which has won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2024, and also generative AI being used for the document generation as well. And now is the era of AI native. But what exactly is AI native? The word is fancy, but in order to put it in a very simple way, an organization where AI is embedded into core business processes and not isolated pilots. Meaning, in more simpler words, you don't have AI in pockets of your organization, right? You make it as a core operating capability. So that's what is AI native. And what are the 5 tenets of AI native organization is data first culture, meaning whatever data you produce, right, starting from your discovery to the clinical, to the regulatory affairs, medical affairs, or any of the function in the value chain, you treat it as a strategic asset, right? And the second one is cross-functional fusion. So as many functions work inside an organization, there are too many data handoffs, right? But if you're being an AI native organization, it means that you have a unified knowledge graph, meaning all the data sitting at a centralized place where the people have the access to the data equally, right? And then the third one is continuous learning. So imagine you have developed a regulatory intelligence tool. So would it be relevant a year later if you use that, if it is not continuously updated? Definitely not, right? So it has to be updated with the ever-evolving regulations. So the same is the case with any applications which we developed in the value chain. And the fourth tenet is the AI-augmented science, which is biologists, chemists, clinicians work alongside the AI co-pilots that surface the hypothesis in real time. And the fifth one is the autonomous workflows, meaning the routine synthesis, documentation, everything is done end-to-end with a human oversight, right? So these are the 5 tenets of AI native pharma organization. But what does it lead into? It leads into scaling intelligence. So scaling intelligence is nothing but it means enabling every decision across the enterprise to leverage the collective knowledge, data, expertise, and experience of the organization. To put it in more simpler words, more data is more knowledge is better decisions is better outcomes. So that is what is the scaling intelligence mean, right? Okay, we have come a very far way from the manual process till the Gen AI era. So why do we still need to go to an AI native era, right? So I just want to give you some of the challenges or the the bottlenecks the industry is grappling with today. There are many, but just to pick up few, One is the siloed functions. So I used to be a bench scientist working in a wet lab, in a drug metabolism and pharmacokinetics lab, maybe a decade before, right? So what we used to do is we used to, do analysis of peptides and peptidomimetics to analyze those samples. So that was a very difficult process when you compare it with the small molecules, right? And we used to take a lot of time to develop the method. But what if we had an institutional memory where an analytical lab or another bioanalytical lab in the R&D of another, in the same organization at a different place has already done that? I would take that and then use it, right? Rather than me developing it from the scratch. So this is what is the siloed functions, right? That can be avoided if you have an AI native organization. Data underutilization is a second challenge. So what does that mean? You have data, but you're not using it. Then what is the use of having so much of data, right? Again, just to tell it with a small example, imagine you're a clinical trial manager and you're preparing a clinical trial protocol, right? And you're preparing a clinical trial protocol for a non-small cell lung cancer clinical trial. And you wanted to know whether you can include smokers, right, in your clinical trial, and what effect does it have on the endpoints and the clinical outcomes. So this data would be lying in your institutional memory, right? Because you have done so many of clinical trials and that is lying inside your repository. But if it is not fair, meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, then you're not using the data, right? It is underutilized. So that can be overcome if you are AI native. Third is the faster expectations. So what do I mean by faster expectations? Everything is, faster expected, meaning you have to bring the molecule in a record time with a very less cost, with utmost quality and 100% compliant, right? Is it possible by a human? Of course not. You have to be augmented with AI. And a classic example of that is the in silico medicine, which has brought up a molecule in a record time of 18 months when compared to 4 to 5 years for a fibrosis disease, right? And this is in the clinical trials phase 2, recruiting actively the subjects in the US. So that is the power of AI, right? And the fourth challenge is the traditional model. In the traditional model is a complex decision making, meaning you have too many stakeholders, you have too many systems, so the decision making becomes very complex. So that can be minimized if you are towards an AI native organization, right? With this said, if I move to my next slide, this gives me a head-to-head comparison of what is it to be traditional versus an AI native. So it's siloed data to connected data, slow and subjective decision-making to intelligent decisions, manual error-prone processes to intelligent workflows, and knowledge locked in silos to enterprise intelligence. And the last and the most important is slow, costly outcomes to better outcomes, right? So having talked about AI native, what does it take for an organization to be AI native? In a very simpler terms, I have put down this figure which says what are the foundation layers of an organization to be AI native, right? The first and the foremost is unified data layer, meaning we have data lakes, right? As I was mentioning, across the enterprise, we have a lot of data. So these data lakes has to be governed by fair data principles. And then you need to have ontologies or standard vocabularies like the SNOMED or the ICD-10 or the unifying the data. And then you have master data management. So this is the base layer for any organization. And then comes the enterprise knowledge graph, meaning you connect each of these data with a relationship, right? For example, imagine you're in a manufacturing lab and a deviation has occurred, right? A protocol deviation has occurred. For example, a sample has been deteriorated, right? So if you have to investigate the deviation, generally it takes a lot of time in order to understand what went wrong. But if you imagine if you have a knowledge graph where you have everything connected, it will beautifully tell you what might have gone wrong. Maybe the sample was kept on the bench, it was not kept in the deep freezer, or maybe it was kept in the deep freezer which was not calibrated, or the deep freezer is malfunctioned, or the person who's operating is not trained enough, or the SOP is not versioned at all, right? So there's so many things which can come from your data which is beautifully connected using a knowledge graph. Once you have the enterprise knowledge graph, then comes the AI platform or the AI layer. So what do I mean by the AI layer is foundation models, MLOps, model registry, and continuous learning loops. So here, the one thing I want to stress is the MLOps. So we see that a lot of companies have POCs, right? Many AI POCs. But actually, how many of them are going to production? Very few, right? Why? Because of the MLOps, in lack of a proper MLOps infra. So these things have to be in place to have a proper foundation for your AI native organization. And then comes the AI agents. So AI agents is nothing but where the AI meets the science. So here you have domain-specific agents, like you have a regulatory writing agent, or you have a PV writing agent, or you have regulatory submission agent, or any agent with respect to the domain use case what you have. And then the last one is a human AI collaboration, where you have explainability dashboards, trust frameworks, and all of these covered by the ethics and governance, so that it is GXP validated and bias is taken care of. As also mentioning in the previous talk, the data is very important, right? When you develop a model, if the data is biased, then the result also is not correct. So you have to take care of all these frameworks so that the result, whichever is produced, is good enough for us to use, right? And having said that, is it very difficult for the companies to adopt to AI native? Not at all, because we've seen some startup companies like Zara Therapeutics or the Isomorphic Labs who are built from scratch as AI native. But what about big companies who are there from very long time, like the Dr. Reddy's or the Novartis or Pfizer's or Sanofi's of the world? They are built from a very long time. But yes, there is a possibility for them to be converted into AI native, and they've already onboarded onto that particular bus, right? So if you look at this particular slide of the pharma and tech convergence, that's what it says. So if I have to segregate the slide, one is pharma companies collaborating with IT companies. A very classic example is Novartis, right? Setting up a COE, AI COE with Microsoft, where it has come up with hundreds of AI use cases. The second example is a IT company coming up with a pharma-specific product, right? Like your Isomorphic, right? Or your Tempus AI in the precision oncology space. And the third one is the pharma companies coming up with IT-specific products. Like Roche has come up with a digital pathology solution, which identifies the biomarkers in the biopsy images of the animals from the preclinical models. So like this, there is a beautiful convergence between the pharma and the tech. Okay, having said all this, what is the next frontier, right? The next frontier is nothing but autonomous pharma. Autonomous pharma is nothing but the human expert guide the autonomous system by defining the goals, ethics, and governance. That is nothing but data, intelligence, action. All three put together is your autonomous pharma. Thank you so much. SLM models, no, I'm not very sure about that.
So one question from my side.
Yes.
Now, since we talk so much of autonomous things,
right,
and your last slide showed what is
autonomous pharma, correct,
pharma
sir. Yes.
lab. Okay. So one challenge will happen, of course, when we go for more of automation, and if there was some error in the validation, because in AI, one of the chief drawback, like since yesterday we have been discussing.
Correct.
I'm a big fan of AI myself. We adopted a very early stage. So based on metabolic mix, we have developed a AI model which can predict cancer on 50 types of cancers.
Wow.
Okay. But then this is all depend on the models what we have created based on the existing data on the metabolomics, how the cellular changes is happening.
Yes.
So there is a fundamental hypothesis.
Correct.
Okay. So when we have this kind of lot of automated thing, and AI, one of the chief drawback is relies on the data what is available,
exactly,
but not necessarily when you collate everything is validated.
Yeah.
If you start validating everything, then AI itself will be huge costly.
Right.
Okay. That's why to circumvent that, we take the summary and we give the conclusion. Now it's up to us how we utilize that.
Right.
So how you intend to bridge this gap?
So autonomous pharma, when I say so, there are some perfect use cases for autonomous pharma, especially from the pharma, the life sciences background. If I take, yesterday one of the speaker was talking about autonomous manufacturing, right? So what they were saying is a classic example of testing the samples. So if, for example, there they just take 3 to 4 samples and then test it as a normal thing. But in the autonomous pharma, what they are doing is each and every sample is tested and then make sure that it is quality controlled rather than a sample pickup of 5% from the batch. So this is a perfect example of autonomous pharma. Like that, basically it's nothing but the AI, Gen AI, and the agentic AI, and multiple AI agents then form together your autonomous workflow or the autonomous pharma. So we can have autonomous pharma in a medical writing space or in the regulatory submissions, right? For example, it can take the data, it can prepare the document, it can also submit it after a human collaboration, and then also answer the findings which have come from the regulator. All this can be automated. Or in a better word, AI agent can do that.
Yeah, I agree. And for example, I'm not sure how many of you are aware about pharmacovigilance or the
Yes,
safety
yes,
what we
drug
do.
safety, correct.
So drug safety, the pharmacovigilance we are based on lot of the literature data which is already available.
Yes.
And earlier I remember a lot of scientists and people used to download all the cases and evaluate
Yes.
and then make summary and then. So
Yes.
here at least is more streamlined because the literature cases that AI pulls the data.
Yes.
And then it's clean the data.
Yes.
And then you get the summary. So
Correct.
things are definitely much faster and more accurate.
Yes.
So I'm just there's a lot of future.
Yes.
If there are no
On-
questions, any last word from sir? You want to answer
yeah,
something?
yeah. So this, on the same point of literature surveillance, actually we have done a POC for a Canadian generic pharma company. The same example of collecting the adverse events from the literature instead of the human going through the complete literature. The agent can actually take it, validate it, and then prepare the report.